The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Deep right, we got tanks up there. Let's follow a range on deep right. I'm right on the target right now. I've got a 17 right in front of me. I'm going after it. Right, I got him.
Welcome back to the Lead Pursuit Podcast. Tonight we're talking about a new aerial war game that has been hiding from the teeming masses of American grognards. It's called Angels 1-6, and it's designed by none other than the infamous Phil Yates. If you don't know who Phil is, you're probably a pleasant person to be around. You don't have a dusty basement filled with little tanks, planes, and angry little infantrymen. But if you're a grognard, you know him chiefly as the brains behind the design and development of Flames of War. Yes, what we call it here on the Lead Pursuit Podcast, that flaming whore. Phil, how are you doing this morning? Your time.
That's a new one for me.
See, I made you laugh already. I already got you there. I told you we were going to pick on Flames of War, and I say that having a closet of shame over there full of Flames of War, Team Yankee miniatures, and I get to finally pick on the designer of that game, and then I'm like, no, I have to ask him about this game that looks really cool, not the one that causes me so much churn. But Phil, how are you doing tonight?
Well, yeah, we can talk about any of it. It's all good.
Yeah, no, we actually, all of us, we've all played Flames of War. We all have huge collections of 15 millimeter miniatures. Some guys are doing things like playing bolt action with their 15 millimeter Flames of War miniatures. Yeah, I know. you can't even talk about those things, And so we find all these other ways to play other games, and it's all based upon the people in your gaming group. Yeah. And we'll come back and talk about that with aerial wargaming. But some of us are cursed with grognard heavy Flames of War groups, and they're just not fun. And I feel so bad because there's like 2 or 3 of us that want to play, and we're like, yeah, but those guys play Flames of War here in Huntsville. So yeah, be that as it may. I did want to talk about, before we get into Angels 1-6, wonderful new aerial war game that you're designing. You're going to send to Kickstarter here shortly. You've got some cool things to show us tonight for the production of it. I want to talk about your background, because that's always one of my little pet rocks about, so Mr. Yates, tell me how you got started in wargaming. To give us a little background about what you used to play before 2002 when you kicked over the can of Flames of War and introduced that to the rest of the world. What got you started?
How did I get into wargaming? I'll start there, because when you asked it, it's like it all jumped back long, long ago. I had the Airfix being in New Zealand, so we have, or particularly had, a very British supply chain. So it was all Airfix miniatures and so forth. And I had a fascination with World War I in particular, and so I had a big collection of totally unpainted Airfix miniatures and bits and pieces. And I do remember my great uncle, I think it was, coming around with great auntie Lil, and Mum encouraged me to show some of my toy soldiers, and it's like, okay, so I set some up and so forth, and don't even know which great uncle it was the only time I met him, but he had fought in Passchendaele with the New Zealand division back in 1917. So I have no idea what he really thought of it, because I was a very young youngster at that point. But sometime after that, Mum heard something on the radio about about war games or TV or radio, and took me to the public library, where I discovered Donald Featherston and all those other classics. And then discovered the Christchurch Wargame Society and got involved there, playing 1/300th World War II with WRG rules, which were absolutely horrendous in so many ways. So years later, came out of university, started working for the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and discovered that there was another World War II gamer up in the IT department. And so we wrote a set of rules to try and improve on WRG. It was mid-'80s, and the rules were about as good as you'd expect for a bunch of inexperienced 20-year-olds who, back then, you didn't get a wide exposure to types of gaming and so forth, because if it wasn't in the library or you didn't get a magazine and order a copy of some very expensive foreign book or something, you didn't get to see it. There was just no internet or anything back then. But it worked okay, and we did various designs and so forth. And then, I was working in Wanganui there, and we had a small war games group there that met once a month. It's a little town, 30,000 people back then. We'd each host a game once a month. Somebody would host a game. And I was playing around with some World War II rules that my wife said, these are really, really boring. And it was about the time Warhammer 3rd edition.
It must be good. It must be great rules.
So I was like, okay. I was in the local game shop and looked at 3rd edition rulebook, and I thought, well, this is interesting. People seem to think this is fun. So I developed Warhammer Panzer Battles, which was back in the late 90s. And the internet was fairly a new thing. And these were just published on the internet, and actually got me a publication offer with Warhammer Historicals, which never actually originated, because they also, I went up to, from there, it's up, from here it's down, to Hamilton for one of the NatCons, and did some demos. World War II Wargaming had died with WRG 2nd edition. They were just worse than the 1st edition, if it's possible. The 1st edition were playable, but had so many problems. The 2nd edition weren't playable and hadn't fixed the problems. So it was like, okay, I'm a World War II fan. I want to get things going. And so I was demoing Panzer Battles there, and right beside me was Battlefront Miniatures selling their 15mm stuff. And on Sunday afternoon, Colin, I think it was, came over and said, hi, can we have a game? So Colin and Pete came and had a game and went away again. I thought, oh, yeah, that's interesting. A friend of mine in Wanganui had been keen on 15mm stuff. But by that point, I had a big collection of 20mm, Airfix, artillery, Revell scale stuff. The scale, of course, varied from 1/76 to 1/72nd to some not quite specified scale in that range.
In the 80s and 90s, scale was optional. And I tried to explain that to people when I would break out my old 40K Space Marines, my Rogue Trader era ones, that are, probably 1.5 inches high, and they're smaller than, my 6th edition Warhammer Marines, much smaller than my Primaris Marines. And I'm like, guys, there was no consistent scale for anything.
Oh, and at that time, though, it was whatever you could get as well, because the range of stuff available was very, very small. The only Firefly available was 1/76 from Matchbox. The only Shermans available were either Airfix's really terrible 1/76 scale one, or 1/72nd from Italeri. So you had to either scratch build or just accept that the scales were a bit wonky. But anyway, the next day they came back and said, would you like to design a game for us? For Battlefront. And I was like, yeah, but I still haven't finished Panzer Battles, and it's a big job, and I've got a job, They were like, no, we'll pay you. I was like, seriously, we'll pay you. Like, come up next weekend, bring your wife up to Auckland, and we'll have a meeting. So we had a meeting, and by the end of the weekend, I was like, okay, I'm going to convince my wife to give me a 1-year sabbatical at half, because they were offering about half what I was earning. Since she was doing her art degree, I was like, yep, we'll have to put your art degree on a student loan instead of being able to fund it. But, it's only a year. You've been playing in your art degree for a while. So, I can have a year. Well, that was 2000.
For 23 years later.
That was 2000, 26 years ago. So, yeah, I started work on Flames of War, and the rest sort of is more well-known history. A while after that, we did second edition and third edition, and then Team Yankee, and we'd also done Vietnam and Great War and a variety of other bits and pieces. And then
they're all sitting over in that bookcase over there.
Yep,
I have way too many Battlefront books
at the bottom shelf here at the moment, because the reference books are a bit easier to get to. But and then around.
It's funny you talk about Warhammer historical, and a lot of people forget that there was this attempt to branch off. In the Warhammer world that was okay. We're going to take a lot of the engines we have, and we're going to move them either from Warmaster into a ancient setting and things like that. And even there's always the discussion about Warmaster starting as a way to generate an Ancients war game, but who wants to buy Ancients? Only dusty old men. Let's have something fantasy that everybody really wants to play. And a lot of us have come out of that gaming era where we may have had historical leanings, but everybody was playing 40K or everyone was playing Warhammer Fantasy. And so we're frustrated historians in a sense.
Well, just to clear up a myth, I have never worked for Games Workshop apart from the unfinished contract with Warhammer Historical. I've never played 40K.
Good, you haven't missed much.
And my entire playing of fantasy was back in that club where there were a few fantasy players, so they set up a big game with multiplayer game. And I've played a few multiplayer games, including a memorable one where it was almost everybody was giants, a giant apiece, trying to get from one end of an 8-foot table to the other against a Empire army with cannon and so forth. And lots of fences and things to trip over on. And I think most of us got about halfway before falling by the wayside. And I think a couple of them managed to get into combat. But
but
so
not a good play.
Yep. In about 2018, I think it was 2017, 2018, Gale Force 9, which was the board gaming of Battlefront, had a significant change of state, and I became Gale Force 9's board game designer. So for about 5 years, I designed board games rather than tabletop games, which was an interesting experience. Then just over a year ago, I started working full-time on Angels 1.6. That dates back to about 2003. It actually goes back to playing with World War I airfix models on the floor. And even back then, at the age of no more than 11, maybe 12, or maybe even 13, but about that age, I was like, this whole Wings of Glory-esque, so it was Blue Max at the time, but every set of rules for the last 50 years has been Blue Max. And the club had their own set, which was also essentially Blue Max. And the whole picking actions thing, just like, this has got nothing to do with what I read about how, dogfights go.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
So even back then, I was like, how can you do, and the term hadn't been invented back then, but I go, you go, aerial war game. And it was like, well, the solution is you have to have the maneuvers and movement at an appropriate level, that the fact that I know exactly where you are and it's my turn doesn't give me a too much advantage or so little possibility that it's boring. And somewhere in the middle is a point where I can do enough in my turn to react to what you're doing and put pressure on you, maybe even get to shoot and so forth. And then your turn, you can do enough to react to me that the whole thing sort of works. And so that would have been late 70s, maybe. Yeah, so that was actually the fundaments of Angels 1.6. And then around 2003, I came back to it and adjusted for the movement and so forth, because, of course, back then everything was, if you were using miniatures, it was either hex-based or arc-based. So you'd have, I'm going to use this, which isn't the right thing, but you'd have a pivot point with a length, and your plane would rotate round the circle, or you'd use a shorter one for more maneuverable aircraft and so forth. And while being realistic in it, for a given value of realistic, they were also an incredible pain and used a lot of resources. Like you had to have either protractors or these rotating things. It was a lot of stuff, especially for a kid. So by 2003, it's like, how can I use straight lines and angles to create an aerial war game? And that was the fundaments of the maneuver in Angels 1.6. The game probably was in testing by about 2005 and went through a lot of testing between about 2005 and 2010. But then manufacturing is a big issue. And back then, the only place that was likely to manufacture this was China. And doing that required basically somehow, remember the internet was still, pretty primitive back then, somehow finding people in China, going over to China and negotiating with them, and then trusting that things were going to happen, which at least back then wasn't necessarily a given.
Exactly.
So fortunately, nowadays with companies like APOL, Longpack, Panda, and so forth, the design of games is a lot more organized. And so when that sort of structure became available, the idea of actually making it happen after a 10-year hiatus was attractive. So, we're almost there. As you said, aiming for a July Kickstarter. And I'll show you some prototypes and things. These are actually factory prototypes. So we can have a look at them in a little bit. But there you are. That's how we got here.
We'll get to that. Well, and before we really delve into Angels 1.6, there's one more, I guess, game design question, and you've probably kind of alluded to it by saying that you hated pre-plotted movement. But is there a least favorite war game that you have struggled through, that you've really tried to give the best college try to, and you've just had to put it down and said, I don't know what the designer intended, but I can't do it. It's not fun, and just set it to the side?
The answer to that, the immediate one, or two that come up, actually date back to events in the early mid-'80s. The first one, actually the second one, but I'll start with that one, is Striker. It's a Traveller game.
I have a copy of that right over there.
Frank Hedwick. And Frank has done some really great games. I loved his World War II game that came out in the late 80s. Can't remember its name now. Command Decision. There's a lot of good things about Command Decision. But Striker, like a lot of games back then, had an incredibly short turn, 30-second turn. Now, to issue orders, it had a lot of realism to it because it was basically a role-playing, large-scale thing. And issuing orders could take 10 minutes to an hour. So it could take 20 turns to issue orders, or even 10 turns to issue orders, which, of course, your force wouldn't survive. It was designed, if you had an umpire who knew and was just using the rules as a guide and so forth, and knew what they're doing, it was probably fun. But as a face-to-face war game, it was horrendous. And you designed your own forces, of course. It had a vehicle designer and so forth. And I did try one. We were going to have a little campaign. A friend, or a guy I knew, wasn't so much of a friend, but we designed our forces and got on the tabletop. And my concept and his concept were completely mismatched. And the result was sort of like some of the mismatches in the early part of World War II, when different concepts of how this was going to happen and how tanks worked clashed. And there were mismatches, and there was a mismatch there. So Striker is one which, after that, I thought there was some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I've got 2 copies of it, and I have never played it. I've designed vehicles, I've designed forces, I've done all this stuff with it. I loved the concept of it, but I could never get anyone to play it, because as soon as you looked at the rules, you're like, this just it was Traveler writ large. It was all the complexity and crunchiness that was in Traveler, and now on a miniatures, tabletop war game, and no one ever signed up to do it with me. So I dust off Striker every once in a while and look at it fondly, but have never played.
And the other one that just comes to mind is about the same period, and it was a Moderns game. So it was set in the same sort of era as Team Yankee, except that was pretty much current at the time. And again, it had 30-second turns, and they took the theoretical stats that were in the brochures for fact. So tanks had like 90% hit rates and so forth. And it was just utterly unplayable, because they were missing the fact that, yes, if you're sitting there on a range and the target's there, and your ideal day and making sure the stats are coming out good, you can get a 90% hit rate. But if somebody's trying to shoot at you, and that's a key thing about all of these stats, if somebody's trying to shoot at you, you spend all your time not getting killed and occasionally try to take a shot. And that makes a huge difference to hit rates, like a factor of 100. So guy David Rowland did some great work on that. And but digressing there, the minutiae of studying the operations research of military operations. But it was just utterly unplayable as well. Oh, and for aircraft, Air War, I think it was. I was hoping. Again, a 1980s dogfighting game. A friend of mine had it, and we played. We played for an evening, and I managed to pull up and get through halfway through a turn when I got shot down. So the entire evening consisted of me doing that.
I have played entirely 2 games of Air War. Now, that's also saying I have 3 copies of Air War here, because I'm a completionist sometimes when it comes to my Hex Encounter war games. But I have played 2 entire games, one of which was, like you say, I think I was the Syrians, my buddy was the Israelis, and I shot down 2 F-15s with anti-aircraft fire before we even got to the merge. And at that point, it's like, whatever. This game's already over. At least our dogfight with MiGs and Taiwanese F5s took a little bit longer. But it's I don't want to say it's an unplayable game, because people have played it, and I just it's too crunchy for me. I have a lot of crunchy ones back there, but I am not a crunchy war gamer kind of guy.
Yeah. So I suppose, to generalize from that, what I don't like is, I don't like the 2 extremes. I don't like games where the technical stuff has overtaken the story. Games should be about the story, not the technicalities. Now, the technicalities should be right. So when a Tiger tank engages a Sherman, the results should be what you would expect, but within luck. The chance of the Sherman, a single Sherman encounter, surviving a front-on encounter with a Tiger is relatively low, and it should be. But then all the different, relationships between everything should be about right. But the story is where the game is. And then the other end I don't like is, for instance, bolt action that you mentioned before. Mm-hmm. For me, that's too much story and too little attention to the tech, or to the tactics, or to any of that sort of thing. So I like, all my designing is based on what is the story, what is the experience the player should have. That's the key design. the experience the player should have. Are they having the experience I desire them to have? Which, of course, includes fun, but also going back to Flames of War, you're a company commander. You should be making company commander level decisions. You should be doing it fairly fast. And, you're a company commander. You tell everybody else what to do and they implement it. And so details below that, apart from the technical stuff, aren't really, did somebody pop smoke? Don't know. Doesn't matter. Well, it matters, but it's not your decision.
Right.
It's just in the.
You do realize no American wargamer has listened to you say that Flames of War is intended to be a company commander's level, because guys, they're acquisitionists. We want more tanks on the table. We want more things. It's so funny how every war game grows in scale to the point where you're like, that's not what it was intended to do. It's not intended to fill this entire 6-foot section of the table with an army that we're going to push across.
Yeah, I admit some responsibility for that, in that, of course, pointing when you're starting something is very much we'll go with that.
Oh, yeah.
But, also,
nobody wants to admit it, but it's true.
Yeah. Battlefront was very reluctant to do the whole dynamic points thing and amend the points, which meant that early errors just persisted. And the worst of the early errors was underpointing cheap stuff, which enabled horde armies.
Right.
And that's sort of a big regret. They were underpointed by a factor of 2 or 3, which is pretty seriously out. And, in retrospect, it's easy to see. But at the time, it was sort of hard to guess in the future.
We could have an entire discussion about underpointing, under-difficultying, things like that. I learned the same hard lesson with Fulcrum Leader. I intentionally made things easier because of how the Soviets did things. But by the time somebody piles on everything they want to do, now the game becomes a cakewalk because they have GCI and jamming helicopters and, suppression is easier and all this other stuff. And you say, that's not what I intended. And they come up with the rules allow me to do it. And you're like, but that's not what I intended. So that's a whole other discussion.
So one thing about games designers, you get good at looking for unexpected consequences. And so when I see law proposals and so forth, my first response is like, oh, God, I would break that by doing this, 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 and this. Because the first thing I look at when I either write a piece of game stuff or see a game is, how would I break that? Not because I like breaking games and it's not my gaming style, but as a games designer, it's become my primary question. How would I break that? What is the thing I can do that would make that rule absolutely a nightmare? And one of the things I also learned was complexity is for something that makes for those breakings getting worse. Between first, second, and third editions of Flames of War, the rulebook went from 80, 90 pages to 200 pages to 300 pages. Did it change the number of things that people were able to break? No, it made it worse because the people who memorized 300 pages of rules always knew that one little thing that in this circumstance would, and the rest of the players were like, what? So for 4th edition, it was like, okay, we're going to make it really, really as clear and in a sense basic as possible. We're going to keep all the rules, the important rules, and everything that else can be in the FAQ, because your average person won't think of it, won't know about it, doesn't care about it. And for the people who are going to try stupid stuff, can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. How do I do this? Like this. But don't put it in the rule book, because nobody really needs to know that apart from the people trying to break it, and they'll read the FAQ.
Yeah. So let's use that as a segue to the rule book for Angels 1.6, which thankfully, if people haven't gone out there, yes, it is. It's their very art, very beautiful. Also available online at the Angels 1.6 website. So it's I giggled with glee as I once again re-downloaded it today as a reference, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that it starts with all the the modeling stuff, all the setup stuff. Here's how to make your airplanes look the way you want. And 10 pages later, we're like, oh, wait, yeah, there's a game here. We need to tell you how to play this.
Yeah,
So,
it's basically
kudos for a different design to the rule book.
Yeah, it comes from perhaps some of that board gaming stuff that I was doing for 5 years. Is like board games are, okay, open the box, take these bits out, plug these bits together. Right, set the board up like this. Right, now we'll talk about how the game plays. And so with Angels 1.6, we've got, take your aircraft out, and here's one of them. They come, where's the camera? It's up there somewhere, isn't it?
Yep.
They come literally like this, except the KLA is a decal. So the first thing it says is, stick the KLA decals on, and here's how you do it. Second thing it says is, stick the A on the flight stand, so that when you're looking at the plane from this angle, you can look at the flight stand and see which one it is. The third thing it says is, stick KLA on the cockpit so that you know.
I laughed about that so hard because that, I'd read that months ago. I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay, got it. Here's how you set everything up. And then today I opened up and said, no, let me go back and read this like a new gamer will. And so I just started laughing to myself because these are all the questions that, as you say, if you just start into jumping into the rules, someone would be like, yeah, but how do I know which aircraft is which? And, so there is a moment to, like a board game, step back and say, here's all your pieces, put them over here. Here's the things you need to do to your cockpit display. Please do this first. Otherwise you'll get lost.
Yep. Then the second section is a sample turn. And that came from basically, particularly my wife reading through and saying, but I don't understand the big picture, basically. Right. So I run through a sample turn, and that I think takes 8 pages, 2, 4, 6 pages, 7 pages. And basically you can just read through it. You don't need to understand it, if you know what I mean, but you just read through it, and it gives you what's going to happen in what order and so forth. It doesn't tell you how it works. It just tells you this is what you do, with a little bit of background explanation and so forth. So, we're up to page 15 out of 40 by the time we get to how to win and how to set up your first game. And again, how to set up your first game, it's like, pick a side of the table, put your plane on it, your opponent puts their plane on their side, roll the dice and see who goes first. Again, exactly. It's like, somebody like
simple.
you
That's
is
way
going
too
to go,
simple. Yeah.
Yeah. But for a beginner, it's like, okay. Right. Okay, I'll do that. And then we get into the turn sequence and the maneuvers and so forth. So, and the maneuvers, by the time we get to the maneuvers, it's got here, where's an interesting one? Split S has got a pretty picture. See if we can show that. I can't even figure out what it is. But there's a picture at the top of the page here of
roll that
what a split
when
S
we've got,
like.
Yeah.
And then there's the how to do a split S. So again, it's all designed for people who really are just going, okay, I don't know what this is, sort of thing, and how it works. If you're a gamer, I mean, most people learn by either somebody else telling them, or these days by watching a video. And so there will be some good how to play videos. So my intention is actually that hardly anybody reads the rulebook. The rulebook should be there.
Noble idea. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, the rulebook should be there, in my opinion, for 2 reasons. One, people going, hang on, I just realized I don't quite understand how this works in this situation. And then they can go, hopefully it will explain everything they need to know. And the other one is for groups where there isn't somebody who knows and they aren't a learn by video type person. They read through the book and go, okay, I'm our club expert, and I'll teach everybody how this works, which used to be the only way before how-to videos, but
exactly
now that sort of shares with that. So, yeah, the rulebook is designed.
I do want to say this one thing for dedicated aerial war gamers. to maybe put off and go, I thought this was a simplified game. Why is it 40 pages of rules? Understand that if you have played multiple other aerial war games, or really, to be honest, any war game, there's a lot of transference here. So you're going to open up that sample turn, you're going to read through, and you're going to understand how the overarching mechanics work. You're going to look at the cockpit display that has it all broken out, what the cost of maneuvers are, that, you know, the action cost, the airspeed. Yeah, it makes it really simple. And I actually found myself going, okay, yeah, I feel like I'm ready to play. And then I realized, wait a minute, I have not read through all of the disciplined maneuver pieces. But as you say, those are really breaking out for somebody exactly how you do a split S. If you've played a lot of games and you go, oh, okay, split S, 4 actions, -3 airspeed, got it. I can point any way I want. You know,
there's a height. Just to mention that one, but yeah,
and the height, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you drop your level of height. You're like, I got it. This makes sense. And then there's always the caveats, no shooting, things like that. But those are all rules that once again transfer. Immelmans, you don't get to shoot.
If you play a few games where you're allowed to shoot up while diving, it's not the end of the world. Until somebody goes, hang on, that's silly. How can you dive and shoot at me when I'm above you? And somebody looks at the rulebook and goes, you can't.
Oh, yeah, okay. You can't. So another game designer segue. I was out for a walk last night and I was running some rules through my head for another project like yours that has been years in the making. And I was going through literally that piece of it. And it was the post-Immelman, post-split S or post-vertical maneuver. How do you explain to people what they can and can't shoot? And obviously in your rules, you went with, hey, just don't shoot afterwards. And I was in that whole discussion of, well, if I went vertical, do I want them allowed to shoot people above them, but not shoot people below them? And I think I occupied 1.5 miles of my walk with all the permutations and iterations of that. And you probably are smarter and said, just don't shoot after you do a vertical maneuver. Get easier.
Yeah. Well, that one for me was basically the problem that if you allow people to shoot after, say, doing a split S, the game consists of, I do a split S and shoot you. Yep. You do a split S and shoot me. I do a split S and shoot you. And so all of those...
Well, very much like Blood Red Skies becomes a game of I burn advantage, point back at you, you burn advantage, point back at me. And if people aren't playing, if there's nothing to drive them to play tactically or to play some physical maneuver other than that, then it's just fly at each other, burn advantage, and
so that's why, Split S and the Immelman turn were two of the hardest ones to get right. And essentially, they are non-combat maneuvers in the game. And not being a combat pilot, and I'll allow you to correct me here if I'm wrong, but essentially they are very dangerous maneuvers to pull during actual close combat because they're quite time-consuming. So you pull an Immelman and you're just sitting there, a lovely target for a long time before you get over the top. So they take a lot of actions, which is your situational awareness, and a fair bit of speed as well. You need to actually be moving fairly fast to pull it. And so they're sidelined from the main dogfighting part of the game. They more occur when you've found yourself pointing in the wrong direction and the dogfight's now behind you, and you just go, okay, I've got the actions and airspeed. I'm going to pull an Immelman or a split S and point back in the right direction and get back in the fight, rather than taking the long way around, which in a lot of aircraft is a slower maneuver. So, so the main focus is on turn fighting with vertical component, which suits World War II stuff particularly well, in that even if you're in a relative boom and zoom fighter of the day, at some point you're either going to be racing through the whole fight, come out the other end, do a slow climb up, turn around and come back again, or you're going to find yourself having to actually engage in a turn fight. if there is a objective like a bomber or something, there's only so much time you can spend out of the fight repositioning for another boom and zoom attack. And at some point, you've got to go, actually, I know this isn't my optimal tactic, but I'm going to just break round hard and try and get that shot and trying to stop you from harassing that bomber. You've just got to go for it sometimes. So that's where the game comes in. And every aircraft does have unique characteristics, but again, in line with, say, Flames of War, for those who are Flames of War players, the distinctions are often subtle. You look at the stat line and think, oh, yeah, that looks pretty much like any other aircraft. But when you actually get into a situation, it's like, actually, this aircraft, if I was flying a Spit, I'd do this, but I'm going to do this because it's easier in this aircraft. Or I just can't pull what I'd pull in a Spit in this circumstance. I'm going to have to do something else. Or I might also be like, oh, wow, this is great. I can do that. I've never been able to do that before. But the differences are just really subtle changes in this table here. And of course, you do have slightly different speed ranges.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah. So
let's go back and talk movement for a second. And This is totally out of order from how I planned the interview, which is sadly what happens when you get interviewed by Doug. But you hit on it that that movement to me is fascinating because it's very phased. It's not you do a move. You have a break turn in there. You have the climb dive piece of this. You've got move. You've got another turn at the end, or maybe an Immelman. You've got this. The entire physicality of the move of the airplane is broken up into different phases and different decisions. And obviously you weave shooting multiple times through there. Thank you. So that it makes more sense. But what led you to want to break movement apart into so many components where so many games just say do maneuver X or do action Y?
The answer comes back to a combination of, that playing with the FX stuff when I was a kid and back in 2003 looking for straight line and non-straight line. But I'm also going to jump aside a little. If you've seen my games, you'll know that I tend to go for a what's commonly called an I go, you go rather than a activation turn structure. The main reason for that is it's just infinitely faster and allows for tactical play in a way that activation turns don't. If I have my turn, while you're doing your turn, I can make a plan, and then I can execute my plan. Mm-hmm. So in Flames of War, you do this, and I can go, okay, yep, I'm going to continue moving round the flank with those guys. Oh, I'm going to divert these guys over here. These guys are going to stop and shoot. I do my turn. I do my plan. Hopefully, your turn, you don't do a plan because you're just following my plan, which is always good for me. But whatever you do, I'm working on my next plan. So I like having that. Whereas if you go activation, it's like, oh, it's my Sherman. I've got to do something with my Sherman. What happened last? Okay, now the situation's changed and I've got to rethink it. And then, now the situation changed. Now the situation's changed. So there's an overhead in every activation. And if your activation is an entire turn, then the overhead is for the whole game is much smaller and the game will flow faster and play faster. So it's particularly important for multiplayer games. So in Angels 1.6, there's for the Battle of Britain, there's a British turn, a German turn, a British turn, a German turn. So if you're playing multiplayer, it's British turn. All the British players go and do their thing, move the aircraft. The only interaction is occasionally it's like, can you move first because I want to land where you in my turn where you're sitting at the moment. And hopefully you've been using your opponent's turn to beg your wingman or somebody to come and rescue you or negotiate things like that.
Exactly.
And so the game plays fast and the Germans do their thing. And if it's one-on-one, the game's designed for multiple aircraft per person. In my opinion, if you're going to play a flying one aircraft, then go play a computer simulation you'll get a much better one aircraft game that way. But if you want to play tactics like try and finger four or Vic or Thack Weave or something, and you're playing a computer game, you've got to find 3 buddies who are prepared to sit behind you for the whole game
Exactly.
as you're the flight leader and spend the afternoon watching you shoot things down while they frighten everybody else from attacking you, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Whereas if you can fly 4 planes at once, which is one of the design goals of Angels 1.6, you can fly 2 4 planes. Beginners on their first game easily fly 2 planes. So flying 4 planes isn't a problem. Then you are your own wingman and so forth, and you can do stuff. But even then, because it's British turn, German turn, I'm flying my Spitz, British turn. It's like, okay, that one's going to do this, that one's going to do this, those 2 are going to do this, that one's done that, your turn. Tactical situation has changed in whatever way it's changed. You've been watching it change and hopefully planning ahead. And so again, the game flows quite fast. So the goal is a 40-odd minute game with 8 aircraft aside, whether it be 8 players or 2 players. 8, I think it was actually got up to about 12 aircraft aside with people who've never played before, took about an hour and 15 minutes. Their first game. So, of course, at that point, it breaks into a whole lot of separate dogfights with planes switching between them as they fly out of the end of one dogfight and discover that it's actually easier just to go into the next one than turn around and go back to the old one. But, yeah, so with that turn in mind, and back to your original question, why is the turn structure the way it was? With the getting rid of the arc turns and so forth, the simplest way I could see of doing that was to mimic your curve with a turn towards the end point and a turn at the end point. Now, sometimes it looks a little funny, but mostly, particularly for people who aren't particularly aerial wargamers, I've never had anybody who's not an aerial wargamer not go, that makes sense. You basically, at the start of your turn, you get the opportunity to do a break, and we're going to do this vertically. They note that the base slots nicely into the ruler, and a break, oops, we're going to go that way. A break is a 45-degree turn, which costs you usually 2 actions and 2 airspeed, but something like a 0, it costs 3 actions because, big wings and no weight, it doesn't roll very well. On the other hand, something like a Fokker-Wulf with its tiny little wings, it's a rolling nightmare and only takes 1 action. But anyway, we roll like that. And then, now I'm going to rotate the whole table. So we rolled from here to here, and we're now pointing up. And then, ignoring everything else, we're going to move up the ruler. And that was a move. Oops, I'm upside down there, but I think it was about a move 5.
Move 5.
The ruler should go that way up. And it's designed so you can put it on either side of the base, depending on what's in the way.
Yep.
So we've done our move 5, and then we get to turns. You can do a turn 1, a turn 2, a turn 3. And turn 2 looks okay. Turn 3 is a bit weird because it almost looks like you've done an Immelman or something because you've gone straight ahead and now you're coming almost back. And then an Immelman allows you to go all the way back. But mechanically, it works and it's fast. And you've got you've got a simple ruler. And for competitive play, it's still, you don't have much doubt. Like, hold your base firmly, put the ruler in place, hold the ruler firmly, put the aircraft where it goes. In competitive play, even with somebody who's has a tendency to slip things a little and...
no, there's none of those. Nobody bumps bases and turns templates.
There is a way of basically doing it that is foolproof to thing. And your rotations are clear and obvious in 45-degree increments. Now, if you're pointing just off and you really want to go a little bit, you can either eyeball it and everybody agrees that, that's less than 45, or you rotate 45 and then you rotate back a bit.
Yep.
And
That was the good thing that I saw in there is that's clearly discussed at the first part of the rules. It says, sure, you burn your 45 turn, but you can come back and be at the direct angle you wanted to be if it's 28 degrees. You know, there's because obviously, and we'll get to it in shooting, you're far more precise than people in shooting. Thank you. We don't have these crazy 90-degree forward arcs, but everything's is being modeled rather than simulated, and I always draw that distinction. And so even that turn 3, I get it. It looks a little goofy, but you're simulating somebody having a much tighter turn and a faster turn rate. And so while it may move out of the line and then turn back 100, some odd degrees, it's because your turn rate is much higher.
Yeah. And if you focus on the story rather than the details, at the end of the game, the story will make sense. That Zero was just whipping around in turn after turn after turn. Whereas the Focke-Wulf was just breaking. Never did a sustained turn because it doesn't have the wing loading to be able to pull a sustained turn, except that time when it went into a really steep dive, got a lot of speed up, and then yanked the stick and burned that entire speed coming around hard. So
I'm curious. I'm always stuck with what you put out there for the generic print and play downloads, and so I can compare 109 and I compare Spitfire, but then my brain, as any aerial war gamers does, runs into all the edge cases of, but I wonder how he did this. I wonder how he did this. So I'll be curious to see as more aircraft come out and things, how you've modeled all the different pieces.
It all comes down to, there's a spreadsheet that's got all the physical characteristics and then tries to calculate a consistent set of things like an airspeed number, because of course my airspeed at 15,000 feet for this aircraft compared with the only airspeed I've got for this one is at 10,000 feet, whereas this one is 25,000 feet, and you've got to try and pull them all back into a number that works. Long term, there will be rules for high altitude and low altitude stuff. Like high altitude, basically, unless you're a high altitude fighter, you're going to lose power. And so
you could put the throttle all the way in the corner, and it's not going to help you. You're going down. It's going to be a downhill maneuver to do anything.
You want to turn hard? Yeah, you can turn hard. And essentially, the turn length has increased at high altitude and the distances have collapsed a little, because your radiuses are going to be bigger, the time it takes is going to be bigger. But if you look at the story, I pulled a 90-degree turn onto his tail, he climbed, blah, blah. It's the same story. It's running at a bit slower pace than it would at a lower altitude. But where it really matters is, but unfortunately, I'm flying a relatively low-altitude P-40, and for some reason, we're trying to escort bombers at high altitude. And my plane is so utterly gutless at this height. I can do everything, but I just can't keep doing everything.
Can't do any of it quickly, and you can't do it more than once. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. And with that, we're going to pause the discussion until next episode of the Lead Pursuit podcast, when we'll be back with Phil Yates to talk about the rest of Angels 1-6. But in the meantime, I'd like to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast, and as always, to keep climbing for advantage.